Every breath you take on a commercial airplane, with one exception, is bled directly from the compressor stage of the jet engines. That air exits at roughly 200 to 250 degrees Celsius and 40 pounds per square inch before being cooled, filtered, and fed through the vent above your seat. The one exception is the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Out of roughly 25,000 commercial jets in service, one design chose to eliminate this system entirely. At 35,000 feet, the air outside your window is nothing like what you breathe on the ground. According to the International Standard Atmosphere, the temperature at this altitude drops to minus 56.5 degrees Celsius. The pressure is only 22,632 pascals, less than a quarter of what your lungs expect at sea level. Human survival in this environment is impossible without intervention. The air you breathe on board starts its journey here, in this thin, frigid layer. Jet engines draw in this ambient atmosphere through massive inlets. Inside, a sequence of spinning compressor blades forces the air into tighter and tighter spaces, raising both its temperature and pressure with each stage. By the time it reaches the high-pressure compressor section, the air has been transformed. Temperatures climb from 200 to 250 degrees Celsius. Pressure surges to around 40 pounds per square inch, nearly 14 times the pressure outside the fuselage. Before any fuel is injected and before combustion begins, a portion of this high-energy air is bled off through dedicated ports in the compressor casing. This is the origin of the cabin air supply. The bleed air is never mixed with combustion gases. Its path is physically separated from the engine's fiery core, a fact documented in every engine maintenance manual from CFM 56 to the Trent 700. The location of these bleed ports, upstream of the combustor, ensures that only compressed, filtered atmospheric air enters the environmental control system. The air leaves the engine at a temperature and pressure that would scald and crush. At this point, it is too hot and too dense for humans or for the sensitive electronics in the cabin. The next step in the chain, cooling and pressure regulation, begins only after this drastic transformation. The air you eventually inhale has already survived a journey through extremes of physics, starting with the raw, unbreathable atmosphere miles above the Earth. The air you breathe on an airplane undergoes a series of mechanical transformations before it reaches your seat. After leaving the engine's compressor section, this air is still far too hot and pressurized for human lungs. The first line of defense is the primary heat exchanger, where outside ram air strips away much of the excess heat. On a typical flight, this step alone can drop the temperature by 50 to 80 degrees Celsius, bringing it closer to safe limits for the next phase. Next, the air enters the air cycle machine, or ACM. Here, it passes through a secondary heat exchanger, is compressed again, and then rapidly expanded through a turbine. This expansion causes a sharp drop in temperature. By the time the process is complete, the air leaving the pack is between 20 and 25 degrees Celsius, close to what you would expect in a comfortable room. This is not an accident. Environmental Control System performance sheets for Boeing 777, Airbus A320, and similar jets all specify pack outlet temperatures in this narrow range. The conditioned air then flows into a mixing manifold where it meets recirculated cabin air. The ratio is roughly 50% fresh to 50% recirculated, a split confirmed by airflow studies and manufacturer documentation. Before it re-enters the cabin, the recirculated portion passes through HEPA filters, which remove at least 99.97% of particles down to 0.3 microns. These filters are effective against bacteria and most viruses, but they do not capture gases or chemical vapors. Finally, the mixed air is delivered through sealing vents at a measured velocity of about 0.9 meters per second, according to in-flight tracer studies. This steady flow ensures that the air in the breathing zone above your seat is constantly refreshed and kept within a controlled temperature and pressure range. Each mechanical step in this chain is documented in the Environmental Control System manuals and validated by regulatory airflow standards. The result is a cabin environment that feels ordinary but is maintained by a precise and carefully monitored sequence of engineering interventions. Inside every commercial jet engine, a series of seals separate the high-pressure compressor air from the oil-lubricated bearings spinning just millimeters away. These seals are not perfect. Over time, heat and friction wear them down. When a seal degrades, microscopic droplets of engine oil can escape, carried by the same pressurized air that becomes the cabin supply. The result is a direct pathway for chemical contamination, one that begins with a mechanical fault, not a design flaw. The Federal Aviation Administration quantified this baseline risk in its 2015 review. According to the agency, oil-related fume events occur at a rate of fewer than 33 incidents per 1 million departures on United States commercial aircraft. That means, statistically, several flights every day experience some degree of bleed air contamination. Each incident reflects a moment when the barrier between engine mechanics and the air you breathe fails, if only briefly. The number, fewer than 33 per 1 million, is often repeated in regulatory filings and airline safety briefings. It serves as both a reassurance and a warning, rare but not impossible. The FAA event rate is based on maintenance records, pilot reports, and voluntary submissions to the Aviation Safety Reporting System. These sources document cases where crews noticed unusual odors, visible haze, or symptoms among passengers and flight attendants. In every instance, the root cause traces back to the same mechanical vulnerability, the slow, inevitable wear of compressor seals. The official statistics only count what gets reported. The true number may be higher, but the engineering reality remains. Every cabin breathes air that has traveled through a system where failure, though infrequent, is always possible. No filter can prevent a seal from wearing out. The risk is built into the machinery itself. Tricrysyl phosphate, called TCP, is the chemical at the center of the cabin air debate. Jet engine oil contains this organophosphate compound because it resists breakdown at high temperatures, up to 250 degrees Celsius inside the compressor. When a seal wears down, microscopic oil droplets can escape into the bleed air. Laboratory tests at Kentucky State University in 2022 measured TCP peaks of 12 micrograms per cubic meter in simulated cabin air. The Federal Aviation Administration's William J. Hughes Technical Center repeated the experiment on a retired Boeing 737. Their instruments, positioned in the forward cabin, recorded TCP concentrations reaching 9 micrograms per cubic meter. These peaks lasted for over 10 minutes before dilution brought them below detection. The numbers matter. The Federal Aviation Administration's occupational exposure limit for TCP is 0.1 microgram per cubic meter for a 30-minute window. Both the Kentucky State University and the William J. Hughes Technical Center tests exceeded this threshold by nearly 2 orders of magnitude, even though the average cabin concentration over a full flight would be much lower. Symptoms reported by flight attendants and pilots after documented fume events include headache, dizziness, memory lapses, eye irritation, and a metallic taste. Some have described persistent cognitive fog lasting days or weeks. This symptom cluster appears in crew medical reports and is sometimes called aerotoxic syndrome, though the term is not formally recognized by regulators. The evidence is not abstract. Gas chromatography and mass spectrometry outputs from these studies show clear spikes when oil is introduced into the bleed air path. Each spike represents a moment when the air you breathe in the seat you are sitting in contains chemicals linked to measurable neurological effects. The engineering data tie directly to human experience, quantified exposure, documented symptoms, and a pathway that begins with a mechanical seal and ends with a breath. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner stands alone in commercial aviation. It is the only major jet that does not use hot, pressurized bleed air from its engines to supply the cabin. Instead, the 787 draws outside air through 2 dedicated fuselage inlets. At cruising altitude, this air enters the system at roughly -45 degrees Celsius. A 150 kilowatt electric motor drives a 3-stage centrifugal compressor, raising the pressure to about 22 pounds per square inch, enough to maintain safe cabin conditions. The compressed air is then cooled through a heat exchanger and expanded in an air cycle machine, delivering air to the cabin at approximately 21 degrees Celsius and 12 pounds per square inch. Boeing's own documentation claims in plain language, the 787's all-electric bleed air-free system eliminates engine-derived contaminants, providing the cleanest air environment in commercial aviation to date. No other commercial aircraft makes this claim. Across the global fleet, more than 25,000 jets still rely on bleed air tapped from engine compressors. The 787's system is not a theoretical improvement. It is a deployed, certified alternative, documented in both the Environmental Control System Manual and the FAA's Type Certificate. The design exists, and the engineering pathway is proven. Section 326 of the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act marked a rare federal acknowledgement. For the first time, airlines were required to study cabin air quality and guarantee a minimum of 0.55 pounds of fresh air per minute for every passenger. In practice, that means passengers in the main cabin receive just 6 to 10 cubic feet per minute, while pilots in the cockpit get 50 to 100. The Association of Flight Attendants, CWA, has called out this disparity, pointing to a system where those at the controls breathe easier than those in the cabin. HEPA filter replacement is not federally enforced, leaving gaps in protection as filters age. FAA ventilation guidelines, largely unchanged since the 1970s, continue to cite incident rates that unions and internal reports dispute. The law recognizes the risk, but the machinery of oversight lags behind. At altitude, the air is shared, but the safeguards and the transparency remain uneven, shaped by policy choices made decades ago. The air you breathe in the seat you are sitting in is engineered, 200 degrees Celsius, 40 pounds per square inch, and half recirculated by design. Yet FAA records confirm fume events still reach passengers. As the Boeing 787 quietly bypasses this system, the science and the risk remain overhead every flight. Share your thoughts below.